July 19th, 1848. This date might not register in your head. No, it is not the end of the Civil War. This was the beginning of a new journey. It was the date of the Seneca Falls Women's Convention Center. It first started out as a dream, a simple thought. Then it began to fester up and ate away at these women. It was too much that suddenly they bursted. By chance, two women talking about women's rights at a London's abolition meeting, but not meeting again until 8 years after, will change American history for women. Here is where everything took off. Here is where it all began. Before Elizabeth Cady was born, the United States had just ended the American Revolutionary War. The Declaration of Independence was born and a new chapter began. Everyone was gay and still elated from winning the war. The United States was more mature and independent country with a greater sense of national unity. Towns that were once isolated were now interconnected to commercial centers. This tight connection was the America Elizabeth Cady was born into on November 12, 1815, in Johnstown, New York. She was the daughter of a well-known judge and mother who was a daughter of famous Revolutionary War soldier. Elizabeth was born in the middle of 5 girls and 5 boys, but 4 of her brothers died to an illness. All that was left were 6 kids and 2 mournful parents. As Elizabeth grew up, she attended school, but she was taught how to act as a girl. Even though school education confined her knowledge, she was sharp at realizing the injustices women were given in society. At her bleak and mundane church, she would hear verses that clearly made a point of the role women had in society. One day, she had asked her nurse,
"Why is it that everything we like to do is a sin, and that everything we dislike is commanded by God or someone on earth?"
Besides the church teaching her the injustices of the world, school reinforced them. While in her English class, the teacher made them read The Wife by Washington Irving. This book showed how degrading women were to men. Elizabeth read this and she threw the book and ran out in tears. The teacher asked what was wrong, and she said she could not read something so degrading as that literature. But the one that impacted her the most was the day she was in her father's office reading a novel, and a lady came in to discuss legal matters with Judge Cady. Flora Campbell, a family servant, came to talk to Judge Cady because her husband died and she wanted her own land back. She did not want her land to be passed down to her irresponsible and uncaring son. Judge Cady had to inform her that the property by law was her son's. When Elizabeth Cady was older, she recounts this time in her autobiography by saying,
"Laws could hurt as well as protect people, and that, if such laws remained in force, women would never be treated equally."
But at age 11, Elizabeth's life and her father's would change for the better and the worst. Elizabeth's only living brother, Alexis, was gravely ill at 21. Judge Cady was distraught by his son being ill. Elizabeth remarks that he was the very apple of my father's eye. Tragically, Alexis died, leaving behind a broken father, a distraught mother, and 5 sisters. Elizabeth could not stand to see her father in pain. She wanted to help rejuvenate her father's spirits, so she tried to be just like Alexis. Elizabeth thought
that the chief thing to be done in order to equal boys was to be learned and courageous.
Therefore, she began taking private lessons from Reverend Hozak to teach her Greek. In addition, she taught herself how to ride horseback. In payment of the lessons, Elizabeth helped Reverend Hozak in his garden, and he let her drive him around town to homes he needed to go to. As she was driving, he would read aloud from Blackwell's magazine or the Edinburgh Review. Elizabeth recalls in her autobiography that she
taxed every power, hoping someday to hear my father say, "Well, a girl is as good as a boy after all."
Unfortunately, this day will never come for her. Elizabeth dropped out of school, which consisted of a woman teaching in her home. Instead, she attended the co-ed school called Johnstown Academy. Here, she was in the upper-level classes for Latin, Greek, and mathematics. Most of her peers were older than her. In her Greek class, she was second place for 3 years in a row. One year, she received a prize that was called Greek New Testament. She ran to her house ecstatically and showed the prize to her father. Upon seeing it, he kissed her on the forehead and sighed.
You should have been a boy.
When she heard these words spoken, Elizabeth was devastated. At the age of 15, Elizabeth Cady wanted to continue her studies. She could not attend the Union College in Schenectady like her peers. Instead, she had to attend Troy Female Seminary. During 1831, there were no colleges for females in America. The only similar college was the one she attended to, which was established in 1821. Elizabeth was not satisfied because it was not equivalent to male colleges. Nonetheless, in 1831, she graduated and studied law and politics at home. After finishing her education, she visited her cousin, Gerrit Smith, in Peterborough. Her cousin's home was a house for the Underground Railroad, which was a network of houses where runaway slaves hid and rested before moving on. During this time, the Fugitive Slave Law was passed in 1850. This was the main reason as to which the Underground Railroads were built so the slaves could run away for a better life. In 1839, Elizabeth Stanton met Henry Stanton, a 24 anti-slavery man. Henry proposed to her in a month, but she did not accept him automatically. But when he mentioned how he was attending the World's Anti-Slavery Convention in London, she said yes to marry him. Henry and Elizabeth were married in May 10, 1840, and were on their way to London for their honeymoon. Little did Stanton know that she was about to meet an extraordinary woman that will help her accomplish a historical moment in women's history. Lucretia Mott was born on January 3, 1793, on Nantucket Island, Massachusetts. She was born into a religious Quaker family. With this religion, the men supported the women speaking their minds in public. Therefore, her family was a part of the Society of Friends, which had meetings that thought women were equal to men. As a girl, Lucretia attended a Quaker boarding school in Boston. By the age of 15, she had become the assistant teacher at Nine Partners, the Quaker boarding school. In 1811, after 1 year of teaching, she married James Mott, a Quaker who was teaching at the same school she was. In 1817, the Quakers split into two different groups. James and Lucretia joined the liberal faction led by Elias Hicks. This group made sure to not use any products that were produced by slaves like cotton or sugar. In 1821, Lucretia Mott was an official minister of the Society of Friends. Being the leader, she would speak at numerous events. One movement that she had a huge part in was the abolition. Many people thought she surpassed numerous advocates for the abolition movement, especially the famous William Lloyd Garrison. In 1829, Mott was speaking in numerous African American churches. At one of the church meetings, a mob was throwing bricks at the window, but Mott was calm as a summer evening. She was so popular in the abolition community that the Black Order called themselves the Sons and Daughters of Lucretia Mott because they named their babies after her. Then, in 1833, she helped organize the American Anti-Slavery Society. But after it was established, it decided women could not be included. Therefore, Lucretia created the Female Anti-Slavery Society. Lucretia was then a part of the Executive Board of Pennsylvania branch. Then, in 1840, Lucretia was one of the delegates from the Board of Pennsylvania to attend the London Convention of Anti-Slavery. Elizabeth Cady Stanton arrived eagerly at London to attend the convention. On June 12, 1840, the meeting began. Instead of befriending the other delegates' wives, Stanton was friends with Mott. Mott recalls the reason she liked Stanton was because of her open, generous, confiding spirit. When the convention began, there was an uproar on allowing women to be in the same area next to a man. But in the end, the women had to sit off in the railed area. Lucretia and Stanton both talked to each other and were both infuriated by the circumstances. On the fourth day of the convention, William Lloyd Garrison arrived. Instead of sitting with the other delegates, he sat with Elizabeth and Lucretia. Garrison said,
After battling so many long years for the liberation of African slaves, I can take no part in a convention that strikes down the most sacred rights of all women.
While beyond these rails, Stanton and Mott create an idea that will forever change history. They are going to have a meeting for women's rights. The convention ended and nothing spectacular happened, but it sparked another historical movement in America's history. 8 years later is when it all began. After moving from Boston to Seneca Falls, New York, Elizabeth was miserable. She felt isolated and bogged down with chores she had to perform. A Quaker friend, Jane Hunt, invited several women, Lucretia Mott, Martha Wright, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Mary Ann McClintock, to a tea party. Here is where Stanton and Mott rekindled their friendship. Throughout the tea party, Stanton was voicing out her opinion about how women are treated. She also complained on how she did not have any daily challenges in her life. There was something missing. As she was telling the ladies this, everyone was agreeing. By the end of the party, they had written a short advertisement to be published in the Seneca County Courier the next day, July 14, 1848. The message was out. Now it was time to prepare for the event. The women used Mott as their bait to lure people in. At the time, Mott was a well-known abolitionist everywhere. After creating the ad, they picked the location, a Methodist church. The women had to work hard because they had less than a week to plan the convention. Since Stanton thought of the idea, she began to write the main reason why women should have rights. She based this off the Declaration of Independence. For Stanton, she stressed the issue of voting for women. She began her Declaration of Sentiments.
The history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries on the part of man toward woman, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
On July 19, 1848, the convention started. Stanton was nervous to talk in front of large crowds. She never spoke in front of one before and share her opinions. It turns out that 300 people came to the convention. Some were males, majority females. During the next 2 mornings, proposals were introduced for the betterment of women. The afternoons were filled debating those ideas. Evenings featured lectures by Lucretia Mott with comments and discussions by others, including Stanton and famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass believed that the whole convention was marvelous and well executed. He declared that the writing of the
Declaration of Sentiments to be regarded as the basis of the grand movement for attaining the civil, social, political, and religious rights of women.
While writing his review on the convention, he mentions how women should be granted the same laws as men and we should not treat them as animals or anything lower than us. He was one of the signers at the convention for the Declaration of Sentiments. In addition, Susan B. Anthony was in the audience. She sought out justice for unfair treatment such as lower wages than men. Her remark on the convention was,
"The grandest and greatest reform of all time, and destined to be thus regarded by the future historian."
Besides Stanton speaking, Mott participated in the convention. She was discussing how women should have the right to vote but not drunks or idiots. In addition, Mott declares that
the right is ours. Have it we must. Use it we will. The pens, the tongues, the fortunes, the indomitable wills of many women are already pledged to secure this right.
At the end of the 2 days, there were 100 signatures, including some men, but more women. After 2 weeks, the Declaration of Sentiments was printed in the Seneca County Courier for the public to read. Soon, New York papers caught the story, and the message spread. After the convention in 1851, Stanton met Susan B. Anthony. When their relationship started to flourish, Anthony became the organizer and speaker of events for women in abolition meetings. Stanton's job was to write the speeches. This dynamic duo was continuously working. Stanton and Anthony were with each other so much that Stanton's children called Anthony Aunt Susan. Before the height of the Civil War was about to happen, Stanton and Anthony were fighting for fair divorce laws and women's rights. But then everything shifted back to the abolition movement, and they had to wait. They had to move their main goal to the side and focus on the abolition movement. Anthony and Stanton formed the National Loyal League in 1863, which helped aid anti-slavery work. Then, in 1865, the war between the North and South was over. Slaves were free. While Stanton and Anthony were elated, this brought them trouble. Many of the politicians could still not comprehend Negro rights, let alone women rights. They thought it was too radical for them and their nation. After the war, the Republican Party asked for Stanton and Anthony to help support the 14th Amendment, which would grant the right for African Americans to vote. This amendment, even though it is beneficial to African Americans, shrank women's voices in America even more so than before. In 1866, Stanton formed the American Equal Rights Association to help women gain the vote. Then, in 1867, she was campaigning for equal rights again. Even though she did not gain a lot of supporters, Stanton found something better. While she was in Kansas, she met a man who was rich. He offered Stanton to have her own newspaper to write and express her ideas and thoughts. So, in January 1868, the Revolution was created. Anthony was the publisher and Stanton was the editor. With this newspaper, Stanton attacked anyone she could. This included the church. At the time, she thought,
education, employment practices, science, medicine, laws, and religion all affected what people thought about women. Public opinion determined whether women would be allowed to vote.
But as she was writing her autobiography, she recounts how,
I get more radical as I grow older, while Susan seems to get more conservative.
As the years progressed on, nothing dramatically happened for women's suffrage. On the 13th anniversary of the convention, Elizabeth remarks,
our meetings were hastily called and somewhat crudely conducted, but we intuitively recognized the fact that we were defrauded of our natural rights conceded in the national constitution, and thus the greatest movement of the century was inaugurated. I say greatest, because through the elevation of woman, all humanity is lifted to a higher lane of action. We already see the milestones of a new civilization on every highway.
As the end was coming near, Stanton's devotion to her cause was wavering. In her letter, she wrote to Mott to reflect the entirety of her journey since the Convention for Women's Suffrage.
Looking over these 28 years, I feel that we have achieved as yet bears no proportion to what we have suffered in the daily humiliation of spirit from the cruel distinctions based on sex.
But despite the loss of hope, she still remembers the good moments with her friend.
How well I remember that July day when the leading ladies and gentlemen of the busy town crowded into that little church, lawyers loaded with books to expound us to the laws, ladies with their essays, and we who had called the convention with our Declaration of Rights speeches and resolutions.
And she was grateful for the people that helped both of them.
And my heart is filled with gratitude, even at this late day, as I recall the earnestness and eloquence with which Frederick Douglass advocated our cause, though at that time he had no rights himself that any white man was bound to respect.
On November 11, 1880, Lucretia Mott died at age 87 from pneumonia in Pennsylvania. One of Mott's friends said that she was more closely connected with deity than anyone I ever met. Now she is the higher work she always craved. She used to say she never wanted to be so at rest, that she would have nothing to do. Stanton's first impression of Mott was,
I found in this new friend a woman emancipated from all faith in man-made creeds, from all fear of his denunciations.
In her lifetime, she accomplished numerous organizations, helped start the women's suffrage, and in 1850 her house was a station for the Underground Railroad. On October 26, 1902, Elizabeth Cady Stanton died in New York. By the end of her life, she had left a mark in history for America and women. Even though she did not meet her end goal when she died, she still became a feminist symbol for Americans. Her words resonate on through the Declaration of Sentiments and her actions at Seneca Falls, New York. In 1920, the 19th Amendment passed. It took 72 years to get the women the right to vote, but if it was not for the words and the determination of Stanton, Mott, and Anthony, then it would have taken longer than 72 years.